Hello, everybody. This is Jennifer.
And this is Jessica.
And we are the Behavioral Plan Podcast.
And this is episode 6.
Mm-hmm.
I think the plan, we talked about it recently, the plan is to do 12 episodes. But because we're entering into the holiday season.
The weeks of no routine. Well, different routine.
Yes. What we plan on doing is, after this episode, taking a slight pause and coming back in January, after the first of the year. We'll do another 6-ish episodes. Yeah, and then we also, in that conversation, talked about, like, kind of rethinking about what this is.
Yeah.
Like, what our idea was and what our focus was originally about this podcast, because I think, you know, in our excitement to get this started and kind of, like, see what we could provide for the community, it's not that we lost focus. I think we just got excited. We started, like, putting our fingers in a bunch of different pots.
And then how our brains work tapped into that excitement and just went, whoa, a little bit of this, let's do a little bit of that, let's do a little bit of this.
Yeah, well, and I think you and I get excited when we start thinking, like, oh my goodness, like, we could really help other people.
Yeah.
And I think in that excitement, we lost what makes a podcast accessible, mm-hmm. which is, like, something that the listener can connect to.
Yeah.
And I think when we, I know for me as an individual, like, this information, it's everywhere in an academic sense. Yep. It's everywhere in an informational sense. But what I feel a lack of is connection to the humanity of it. Mm-hmm. And I'm feeling a lack of community. Like, it takes effort to find community. You know, you need to find, like, parent support groups and, like, surround yourself with people who know and understand sort of the uniqueness that you're going through, because it can be really isolating, like we talked about in the first episode. And so we had a little chat, and we were like, okay, so how can we refocus, you know, for this episode and for the rest of this season, how can we refocus back to that, you know, community piece, that connection piece? How best can we do that? And it's, you know, honestly, it was looking at the language that we first created.
Yeah.
You know, it's a parenting podcast. It's a parenting podcast hosted by parents of neurodivergent children for parents of neurodivergent children. And not that you're the only people who are allowed at the table. No. Anyone can benefit listening to this. But the intent is to, like, just talk about our lives and talk about our situations, and not from an angle of this is how you should handle your IEP in 504, but from the angle of this is what I'm dealing with right now. This
is how I'm experiencing things. This is how I'm feeling as a parent.
Right.
And, like, one thing that really stood out to me before we finally just said, all right, let's do this. Like, let's make this happen, was when I first read that Low Demand Parenting book.
Yes.
Because she was like, you read all these parenting and developmental books, or even, like, the ECFE class that I bring my daughter to, like, they talk about milestones and all this stuff, and you're trying to do your best in participating in community-based resources, or resources like books or parenting guides or whatever the case may be. And there's so many out there that do not apply to your children. Yeah. They do not apply, or in the full realm of context, right? And so you continue feeling isolated. You continue feeling like you're not being seen, like your child's not being seen, and that you're doing everything wrong, even though you're not, because there's not a lot, like she talks about how there's not a lot of relatable context out there.
Right.
And so she developed this book that was a cozy read, in my opinion, because it felt like I was able to relate to some of it. I was able to, like, remember things, but also, like, cozy in the sense of, enjoyment?
Yeah, I mean, the way that it's written, it feels very conversational.
Yeah.
Right? And there's not a lot of, like, I think it gives permission, right? She gives examples that give permissions to be like, okay, this is, like, actually really easy and attainable. Like, think about, your hardest ask for your child, and think about all the different layers of demands that are set on them, and where can you let some things go. And I think what it's doing is it, like, much like what we're kind of hoping this podcast does, which is like, we're going to talk about certain situations, and we're going to admit to the parts that are hard, and then talk about the things that are easy to let go. And and yeah, I mean, I've got 2 experiences just in the last couple weeks that, like, I had to bring my kids to. I chose to bring my kids to, and we show up. We show up, and
you give yourself grace. You forgive yourself for the moments that you're not able to be the parent that you're really trying hard to be.
Well, because we're people and we get dysregulated too.
Oh, absolutely. But to your point, like, the whole, like, this is why it surrounds that whole topic of, like, normalizing a conversation.
Yeah, right.
Building a community where it's a safe space to go, man, our kids deserve better. Our kids deserve not to be gawked at and pointed at and talked about and whispered about, or whatever the case may be, treated equally throughout all communities. But then also go, hey, like, are you okay?
Yeah, right.
How are you? I make it up every day.
Or not
I
feel
like
alone.
Sometimes. Yes.
Like, because, like, for the 2 experiences that I'm going to talk about later on in this podcast, one of them had other children there, and some of them were behaving similarly. That was a hard word to say. Similarly.
We don't do things similarly around here. Okay.
So what made that experience easier is that it wasn't just my child. Yeah. And I think when you talk out loud about your experiences, then you're giving other people permission to say, it's not just my child. Right now it is just my child in the middle of this movie theater that I'm having to handle, but it's not always just my child. And that there are other people who have similar experiences, and we don't want to, I don't want to just be stuck at home.
Yeah.
And I don't want to have to turn down things that I know my children will enjoy and get something out of, simply because I don't want their differences to be so loud.
There's another,
and I know that's like I feel kind of shitty saying that out loud, but, like, their difference sometimes is so loud in a space, and loud not always in volume, though one of my children, it is always volume, but loud in the sense that it's noticeable in the way that everyone will see it,
right,
but not understand what they're seeing.
right.
And it's that not understanding what they're seeing that really stresses me out, because then, like, my anxiety gets flared, and then I feel like I start parenting in a way that I don't want to parent.
Absolutely.
Because I'm not responding to my kids anymore. I'm responding to my anxiety, or I'm responding to my assumptions, right? Because I'm assuming I won't say no one. I'm sure there's plenty of adults out there that say the thoughts out loud. But, in a lot of cases, it's not actually being said out loud. It's being said through body language, or it's being said in your own head through your own assumptions. That, like, these people are really, stressed out right now because of how my children are behaving, or they're confused, or they're judging me, or, and, like, sometimes that outward judgment is actually your inner judgment, right? That you haven't reconciled. Because anybody can have a thought and have a feeling and have their assumptions, but if you're not doing the work on yourself to be like, well, why is it that it's bothering me in this public situation? Well, because I don't think it's as simple as feeling embarrassed.
No.
Sometimes I feel embarrassed. Yeah. But I don't think it's as simple as that.
I know, but it's some of that, like, what was the one of the posts this week? The tantrum versus meltdown.
Yeah, right.
Some of it is out of response to, like, what are you letting your kid do, right?
Yeah, well, and what I find interesting is when my kid is having a meltdown out in public, I shut everything out.
Mm-hmm.
I meet the needs of my kid in that moment because I'm not embarrassed by that. I can see that my kids or my kid, whoever's having the meltdown, is like
supported.
Excuse me. I see that they are. I used to describe it like they are in the middle of an emotional storm, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they are trapped inside the eye of this storm, and all of these emotions swirling around them and overwhelming them. And when I started thinking about them like that, I am like, it was impossible not to feel empathetic.
Mm-hmm.
And it was impossible not to be like, okay, so how do I help calm the storm around them, or get my hand through that storm so then they can feel that they're not alone. Like, I started thinking about it like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we're out in public, that's all I care about.
Yeah.
It's just like getting my kid to feel, and I'll be on the floor, I'll be in the middle of
Absolutely.
an aisle. Like, I don't care. I'm not going to remove my child to make everybody else feel comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, the whole world can stop to help my child.
Right.
That's my attitude.
Absolutely.
It's the behavior that's like my 4-year-old has done now a few times in the last couple weeks, where it's that sensory seeking, it's that hyperactive, impulsive, like squirrely behavior that I'm like, oh my god, oh no,
Mm-hmm.
I can't sort out how to help my child right now, because like I'm trying to manage my own response to everything, plus what's happening in the environment, plus like social expectations, and then he's 4.
Mm-hmm.
So like, how do I rein him in? Like, I can't, like, there's so many tools in my toolbox that don't work.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to, in many ways, rely on the help of others.
Yeah.
And
once again, it's all forms of community, not just the people who understand and experience what hyperactivity truly looks like.
oh my god, yeah.
Like, not just have a hard time focusing at the task at hand. What hyperactivity truly looks like.
Well, I can talk about the
And-
movie experience yesterday, because
Yes.
that is a very accurate picture of what
Yeah.
hyperactivity looks like. So,
Well,
go ahead.
Oh, I was just to round off my point here, but like similar to moments when your middle would elope, and you
Yeah.
told me about being in line at ice cream, and here goes your child, and not a single person stopped to help stop your child
Right.
as you're solo parenting multiple kids.
Yes, right.
And your child's headed to a street,
Yes. A very busy street.
a very, very busy street.
Yeah. This was at Connie's Cream Cone.
Mm-hmm.
And that's off of Dale and Dale and Marshall?
Something like that.
Dale and something. And it's kind of a busy area. And the way that Connie's Cream Cone, like the structure is like one of those walk-up shops, ice cream shops. And where you stand in line is like essentially on the corner of this
The
busy
sidewalk,
street.
yeah.
And all it takes is like 5 big steps and you're in the street.
Yeah.
And there was a line. Kids don't wait well in lines
Period.
in general, but like this particular I didn't have all 3 kids. I just had the 2.
Mm.
We had just gone to a water park. My middle successfully immersed himself in water for the first time without a panic, so we were all, I was like, we're getting ice cream,
Yeah.
it's sunny, it's beautiful, like, let's do this. And so, and we were invited by another family with children who just like stand still and sit still, like effortlessly. And I was trying to order ice cream and pay for it. And then he went and ran because it was overwhelming. It was hot, which is a trigger for him. He just did all this big, exciting thing at this water park. Everyone's talking and moving around. And then there's this line of people. And he just goes and starts darting towards traffic. And I turn and I watch as at least 5 or 6 adults just stared at him and watched him run past him to go out into the street, while I'm shouting at him, it's a busy road, stop, red light, freeze, like all the terms.
tools, like.
And not a single adult.
No.
they just stared at him and stared at me.
Mm-hmm.
And I just was like, you don't have enough time in that moment to be like, could you fucking stop him?
Right.
like you want to say, right?
And I get, like, the world has become this, like, don't touch my kid, don't look at me,
don't touch my kid.
I get it.
Don't look at me.
But, like,
I still want that.
absolutely.
But at the same time...
But if someone's in danger, it's okay to help other people out still.
No, this is a rule across the board.
Mm-hmm.
If you see a child and that child starts running out towards traffic, I don't give a fuck.
Mm-hmm.
If you yell at me for an hour afterwards, I'm going to stop your child.
Absolutely.
If you get mad because I touch your child or I interject or I assumed the worst, because sometimes, like, I've stepped in and helped kids be like, your parent. Like, where's your parent? Like, I see them over there. I'd feel more comfortable if you were closer to your parent versus this road.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, the parent are like, oh, they're fine. And I'm like, your child is about to be in the street. If they're not fine, I'm really not trying to judge you in your parenting. I'm just trying to protect your child. That's really all I care about.
Right.
And so, like, I will stop a child.
Yeah.
You know.
Mm-hmm.
And there have been a handful of people who have, like, stepped in to be like, oh. But in general, that's not the case.
Right. I'm slowly learning this world right now with my 1-year-old. So
it's a whole...
That's why so being so close to being done with this pregnancy and experiencing elopement specifically in parking lots and witnessing people slam on their brakes because I do not move fast.
Yes,
to
right.
catch how quick her little feet are.
People are watching.
And she, yeah, you're funny. You're not funny. Let's bring it back.
Yeah, and again, like, this is not the child's fault.
No,
or
not
responsibility.
At all.
We are adults living in this
so
adult
scary.
world. It's absolutely scary because we know how distracted drivers are.
Absolutely. If you're in a parking lot, I bet you over half those people are on their phones or texting or being like, I'm here, or I'm on my way, or
right.
You're not paying attention if a kid's running out.
Or with the radio, or they have kids, like, because, like, here's the thing, like, my phone's my phone. I do my best.
Mm-hmm.
My kids in my car are the greatest distraction.
Absolutely.
So, like, my eyes might be on the road, but my brain is 100% thinking about what is being yelled at me from the back seat. So, so it's not even just, like, your eyes could be out front, but that doesn't mean you're registering that you're seeing a kid running away from their parent.
Absolutely.
And
But yesterday.
So yesterday, two of my kids didn't have school.
Mm-hmm.
And so my youngest did, and I was like, you know what? We'll just all stay home.
Let me just make a point here. It was Friday the 13th.
Look, I
I just gotta say.
I didn't do the work of checking in on my planets. We got some in retrograde right now. Then we got a full moon today, this Saturday that we're recording this. And it was Friday the 13th. And there was just, like, a lot of evidence not to fuck around and find out. But I did, against my better judgment.
I'm not laughing at you, I promise. I'm just...
No. I mean, sometimes you make choices and you gotta own up. You gotta be accountable for your choices.
That's a triple threat right there.
So, but that doesn't mean you don't do the thing, right? Like,
yeah.
My little voice inside my head was like, girl, you know what's going to happen. And I'm like, but it's a Friday, and the movie's at 12:30. Everybody's in school but my 3 children. Like,
right.
And it's nap time.
Yeah.
And it's Moana 2, which has been out for weeks and weeks and weeks.
Sure.
So I'm like, we're going to be the only people in this theater.
Yeah.
And so I thought, no big deal.
Right.
Well, here's the thing. It wasn't a big deal, except for there was one other family that showed up. Mm-hmm. And they looked like a very sweet family. 2 parents, 1 child. Said child looked very obedient. It just sat there and watched the movie, didn't talk out loud, nothing. And then here I am with my little zoo of a 10-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 4-year-old. And we got popcorn, we got lemonades, we're all set and ready to go. And so I'm going to tell the story just in regards to what my 4-year-old was doing. Mm-hmm. 10-year-old was like just trying to lay down and watch this movie. My 6-year-old was just trying to vibe and sometimes sat in that seat, sometimes moved over to a different seat, and that was because the 4-year-old was giving permission because a 4-year-old cannot sit still. And this is hyperactivity.
Mm-hmm.
Which my 6-year-old has too, but he's on medication to help with that, to help support his brain function with that. But my 4-year-old does not have an official diagnosis in anything, so he can't be medicated in anything just yet. So we get into the seat, and he's sitting between me and his oldest brother. And again, it's just me. There's no other adults there to help me.
Right.
And he's doing fine. He's kind of doing his thing where he's sitting, he's kneeling, he's leaning, he's shoving as much popcorn into his mouth as he can. Trailers are trailering. Everything's fine. Then he realizes that his seat can move. They can recline. So he is popping it up, popping it down, popping it up, popping it down. Does that for a while. And then he's up on his big brother, and then he's up on me, and then he's shoveling food in his mouth. And once that no longer sufficed, then it was getting up out of his seat and in front of us. Normally at this theater, where it divides between the row that we sit in and then the row that's reserved for anyone with wheelchairs, or anyone who can qualify for the handicap seating,
right.
It's metal bars, but this was a quarter wall with a glass panel that then had, so then you could still see the screen if you were super tiny. And I was counting on the bars because then he could step up, step down, kind of dangle his body around it. And I was counting on that, and that's not what we had today. And I was like, sweet. So now he's belly over the glass and teetering, and then eventually decides to climb up and over this thing, which, had no one else been in the theater, I would have just let him do his thing. But now I'm being watched as a parent, and I feel the answer isn't just to let your children do whatever they want,
right?
But it's also recognizing what their body is seeking. And because he seeks such a high level of proprioception input and just satisfying that dopamine release that he gets from doing things, full body things, it's I know that and I see that, and I'm trying to figure out how do I parent with that or around that, right? You still have to provide boundaries, and you still have to be well, hey, we're here in a theater. And so that's what I did. I would go up to him and I'd be hey, did you notice that we're in a movie theater? In a movie theater, the expectation is that we sit down. I'm okay if you need to move your body around, but let's limit where your body is moving. What he's for.
Yep.
So he's okay, comes back and tries again. The movie is going at this point, and so it captivates him for a bit, and then it's not enough. So we get to the point where now our behavior is kind of getting larger. So now for the rest of the movie, and this is an hour and 40-minute movie, we take turns doing things sitting in his seat, crawling over the seats, moving down to the very front row and walking over all the seats, and then running around, and then crawling over all the seats, and then running back around, and then lifting up, reclining, and just kind of rolling and watching for a bit, watching it upside down with his feet up back on the cushions. And for the most part, I'm letting him just do it.
Yeah.
Then there's a part where I was I wonder if I can try to get him back. So I go over there and I'm hey, and I'm trying to give him little compression squishies. I'm why don't you come do drink some lemonade and eat some popcorn with us and revisit the seats that we paid for. And then again with this these other people are watching me and my parenting, and I'm teetering between not giving a fuck and really kind of giving a whole bunch of fucks.
Right.
So I go over and I'm checking in with him, and then the second I get within 5 feet, he's oh, it's chase me time. And I was oh no, I triggered chase me time. So now he's running up by the screen, runs towards the emergency exit with his arms out, and I'm like, no, you gotta stop. And my loud voice then triggers more chase me time. So I get to the point where I like kind of get him and I walk him out of the theater and we reconnect and we do some jumps and I like reestablish like what the social rules are, what the social expectations are. And then we move back over to our seat and it's kind of the reset button, but then it eventually does it all again anyway. And he moves then like cramming himself behind a chair and the wall and just like watches the movie a bit there with that compression that's happening. And then crawls. He's just crawling around everything, running around everything. His body cannot sit still. And that is hyperactivity.
Yes.
It's that constant need to move. It's that constant need to have like something happening. And it could be positive, it could be negative. I mean, he had fallen out of a chair. It didn't really look like the impact was that big, but he needed to cry, and so he cried about it. And then something sad happens in Moana too.
Sure.
And all the characters' faces are very sad, to which then he had an empathetic response to and didn't know how to handle it. And so he got really sad, but he didn't want me to hold him, but then he did. And then me holding him wasn't holding. So I'm sitting, I'm sitting on the floor, cross-legged at that point in the movie, and he crawls into my lap and then crawls up around my neck and shoulders, back down into my lap. I was very grateful for all my dance training. And then just like kind of rolls around in my lap.
Yeah.
And then that was the movie. And then it's done. We grab all of our things, but it's now a transition. So now he's running around the whole theater while his brothers are getting their layers on. I'm getting my layers on. We're throwing away our trash, and I'm letting him just like run around the theater because what else am I supposed to do?
Right. Absolutely.
So then it's time, and at this point, it's better if a brother helps. So it's like, hey, it's time to go. Come with me. And then he's like, okay, yeah, sure, no problem. They walk out of the theater, and then he immediately runs towards the concessions because I had said no to candy, and now he's wanting to ask again about candy. So he runs to the candy thing, and he grabs it, and I'm calm. Girl, I'm calm. I promise you I'm calm. But the second he makes eye contact with me, he's like, she's going to say no. So she takes off with the candy, across the movie theater. Everyone who works there is looking at me like, and I'm like, look,
sure.
You make your assumptions, you make your judgments. Right. You couldn't even fathom a fraction of what's going on here.
And your 4-year-old isn't intentionally stealing candy.
No, he's not. But it wasn't even like it just felt more like can you just try to control your children? I'm like, nope. The moment I try to is when all of a sudden they're like, aha! So like and reverse psychology doesn't work like, oh, I don't even care, so I'm just gonna walk this way. Like that doesn't work either. They're like, awesome.
Deal. Yep.
So I did the thing you're not supposed to do, but it's because he's so dang fast and he scurries around so fast. And so like my older two went to the display, like can we just like stop selling bric-a-brac at every goddamn place.
Everywhere.
Like
everywhere.
There was the center aisle and like it's a fraction of my paycheck just to buy popcorn and soda.
Yes.
So like there's toys and all of these things. There's like this big hammer and like
what? At the movie theater?
Yes, like they had like toys out, like stuffies, and like there was this hammer thing that of course my boys were like, can we have the war hammers? And I'm like, no. And then Marcus is like, it's from the Lord of the Rings movie. I'm like, I love it too, but no. So there I let them just like play with all the toys. I go and I take like 4 really big leaping run steps while Kellen's not seeing me as he's scurrying away like a little treasure thief. And I grab him and I grab the candy and he begins to noodle flop and all this stuff, right? Like
all the dead weight in the world.
So I don't like handling a child's body when they start doing that. So I safely put him on the ground and I walk over to hang up the candy. boys are like, Mom, can we have... And I'm like, stop, no, turn, Kellen's gone. And I'm like, okay.
Every parent's biggest nightmare.
No, I was just annoyed. I was like, well, of course you
of
are.
Course, but
so I walk around the corner to look down the aisle where all the different theater entrances are on the one side, and he's not there. And I'm like, okay. And I look back in the lobby, and it's a smaller theater, so like at a glance you can see where everyone is. Nowhere. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh fuck. So my oldest goes into the men's room, I go into the women's room, and I'm like, hey buddy, it's time to go, we gotta go. Nothing.
Yeah.
And so now I come back out and I'm trying to stay calm, because here's the thing about neurodivergent children. The second their safe person starts panicking, they will feel those feelings times 100. And they then don't know what to do with those feelings.
Right.
So I'm like trying to regulate my body while also trying not to panic, also realizing that my kid's like gone.
Yeah.
So then my first thought is check to see if he went outside. So I look outside and I like do a quick scan, and I'm like, I don't see the colors of his clothing, I don't hear anything, and it's cold, which means he's gonna like take 2 steps outside and be like, absolutely not, and then try to get back in. So then the bigger boys go up and down the aisle just like, hey, where are you? We're going. And then I saw one of the closed doors was kind of ajar, so I like went into the movie theater and I like looked around for anyone who was like,
no.
Like just, he wouldn't be hiding, right? He'd be like jumping around, and adults would be like, where is your parents? Something. Because it was the Wicked movie, so I'm certain someone would be like, they're distracting me. So nothing. So then I go back out into the main lobby, and I'm like, no, I'm in panic mode. I can't stay regulated anymore. So I'm like looking at the adults that work there, and I'm like, they're not paying attention, so they're not going to know where my kid is. My middle child is like really trying to figure it out. He's like, you go over there, I'll go over here, Mom, you do this. And I'm just like, and then I can hear it in my oldest boy's voice, the panic starting to set in, and I'm like, oh no, this is really a thing. So I follow my middle child over further away, and I'm like, I really don't think he went that way because I didn't see him pass me. And so we turn back around, and just for a fraction of a moment, I see this tiny little person hiding behind one of those cardboard cutouts for movies. But it's not where it normally is. It's like, there's where the entrance is, where you come in to buy your tickets and then get into the main theater. It's like somewhere in that area. So I'm like, there's literally 3 adults just like casually having a conversation. Not one of you noticed me in a panic about my kid, or my kid that was hiding.
The 4-year-old who was probably like thoroughly enjoying the show.
So then I see him, and I kind of lose control of myself in that moment. So I scurry over there, and I hop over this little ledge that's there, and he's just like, ew, because he doesn't understand.
Yeah.
And so I like swoop him up into a hug, and I just squeeze him really tight, because I didn't realize just how panicked I was until that moment. And then I set him down, and then I could hear his brothers like, Mom, where'd you go? And I'm like, hey, I found him, he's over here. And so they join me. And like the first words out of my mouth with him, I'm like crying now. My first words are like, you cannot hide from Mom like that.
Right.
I was really worried that I lost you. And his face went from like beaming and happy to all of a sudden like, oh. And I'm like, we're going to go home. You're safe. Everyone's okay. But remember our rules when we visit a social, like a public area?
Yeah.
The first rule is stay by Mom, and this is why. Well, now my 10-year-old and my 6-year-old come crashing in, and they're both like, we couldn't find you anywhere. Where did you go? We were so worried. Why would you do that? Why would you hide from us? Mom was so freaked out. And he just, I didn't know. I didn't like that you wouldn't buy me candy. I'm like, my dude. I understand.
Yeah. that must have, like, felt really big.
Yes, right.
Because you were probably, like, he was probably disappointed.
Yep.
And he was, and like you said, he doesn't know.
He doesn't know.
He's
he
4.
doesn't understand.
And B, he's
Right.
got all this other stuff that, like, his body's giving probably
That
conflicted.
impulsive, like, well, I'm going to go hide then.
Yeah.
I'm mad at you. I'm going to hide from you. Yeah, totally. And so we get in the car, and we get in the car, and normally when we get in the car, there's, like, some sort of argument about what song we're going to use. Or Minecraft parody songs. Is it going to be Imagine Dragons? Is it going to be, you know, like, the 6 songs we listen to all the time?
Mm-hmm.
And my oldest is in the far back, and he just goes, hey, guys, could we actually not listen to any music? And I was like, oh, okay, why?
Yeah.
And he goes, because I'm still trying to take deep breaths and calm down, because I was really scared when we couldn't find, you know, the 4-year-old. And I, in that moment, realized, like, oh, you know, I did my best to try to stay calm, but my oldest has pretty strong anxiety, too, and didn't handle the situation like a typical 10-year-old would.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's
beautiful moment that he's advocating and using his tools.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, so that's what hyperactivity looks like when you go out in a public area. And elopement, that's what elopement looks like too.
Now, defensive auntie over here will say, if you listen to that story and you go, don't take him to the movie theater, let me tell you, A, anyone and everyone is welcome to the movie theater.
Mm-hmm.
That's just my opinion.
Yep.
Deal with it. B, and this is where I get into it with a lot of individuals that believe in obedience and be seen, not heard, or all these just god-awful phrases that you hear. Mm-hmm. But if our children aren't brought into these opportunities, like going to a movie, how do you teach that at home? How do you teach that if you're not comfortable going out and experiencing this very unfortunate thing, which
yes.
I mean,
I sent you that message right away. I was just like, well, guess who's never allowed to go back to the movie theater again? Because that was my direct response is, well, I'm not doing that ever again.
Because in that moment, you're feeling, you're overwhelmed, you're overstimulated.
Yes. And I never want to have to experience that again. Right? So there's that, like, initial avoidance choice.
Yeah. But then you figure out a way to, okay, maybe next time it's just me and him. Or maybe next time.
Yeah,
but I'm saying, if someone were to hear that and be like, in their comment or their responses, then just don't do it.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's for sure.
Yeah.
And I understand on a, like, really basic level.
Yeah.
My response, or, like, my experience as the parent of these children is, I would like this to stop.
Absolutely.
And that was my experience, like, the entire time. Like, I saw my child. I saw what he was, you know, grappling with. I saw the challenges or the way that he was adapting to the environment. I understood what I was seeing, and I still wanted it to stop.
Absolutely.
Like, I wanted to stop just as much as you do, Nancy.
Right.
You know, Barbara. Thomas.
Right.
Whoever is in the room with us. I wanted to stop too.
Right.
But there's all of these other layers involved. And the thing is like, if your child was saying, like, talking during the movie or was wiggling around, or, like, maybe he was like, oh, I kind of want to go hang out with those other kids, and, like, came and joined us, it wouldn't bother me at all.
Right.
Children being around in public spaces don't bother me. Their sound doesn't bother me. Seeing them doesn't bother me. Them bouncing around doesn't bother me. If anything, it's comforting. Because I'm like, oh, great, this is a space that my kids can be kids too.
Yeah.
And so, but I also understand I would like it to stop.
Yeah.
And I understand you would like it to stop. But then let's, like, understand, okay, that's my response, but I'm not going to stop it because this is what my child is seeking right now. I'm going to help keep him safe. I'm going to help teach the lessons he's able to learn in that moment.
Yeah.
And then we are going to, in a regulated time, talk about what happened.
Right.
Maybe I create or find a social story about, going to the movies. Maybe you're right. Maybe the next time it's just a one-on-one one with the focus of learning the skills or practicing the skills.
Bring one of his weighted stuffies.
Right.
Or
Girl, I had therapy tools.
Oh, I'm sure you did.
And
I'm just saying it out loud.
And I even okay, I'm going to ask you to go and sit in a chair for an hour and a half, which means we need to do certain sensory diet things leading up to it. And it still wasn't enough.
Yeah.
Because he's 4.
Right.
Right. And those are some of those skills just don't come until later on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and just experience and repetition.
Yes. And that to the thing, how is a child supposed to learn these things if they don't practice the things in real life? And I feel like that's applicable for a lot of things. So if the adult's saying, hey, you're not allowed to be in this space until you have certain skills, well, how do they learn those skills unless they're in that space? So who's going to be the practice round?
Right.
This was part of a conversation I had with a parent recently who was told their child couldn't be in a preschool classroom because they needed to learn certain skills first. Well, how are they supposed to learn those skills at home?
Right.
When they don't have a classroom with certain rules and boundaries, with other children, with because if you're saying, hey, they get really overwhelmed with loud noises. Well, at home, it's not loud.
Right. At home, they have their safe person.
At home, At home, there are different rules. And so even if you're like, hey, they do need to learn these skills, and you're like, okay, well, I'm going to bring them to choo-choo bobs, right? And there are certain social expectations, social rules that everyone has to sort of comply with.
Yeah.
With the flexibility of this is a space for children, and children are going to be here, right? Just like a preschool is a space for children, with children there. So then you go and you practice some of these skills there. But the thing is there's something that happens when you're in a space that you're in every single day, right? The novelty of it has sort of worn off. There's something to be said about deepening relationships that you're building with the adults and other children that then lend to certain behavioral responses that wouldn't happen if you are just meeting children for the first time, because there's novelty involved.
Right.
And there's also we all do it, right? The way I interact with adults that I'm just meeting for the first time, or that are in that stranger, unknown person category, is different than someone I work with. As someone that I've become very familiar with, that I have a relationship that has gone beyond the surface value. And so if you're expecting a child to come into a space with skills already, and this is different than toileting skills. The classroom can't support diapering. That makes sense. But if the classroom's saying, oh, the child needs to be able to it's so weird. It's so weird. The conversation I had with this woman was very weird. Anyway, that was a little tangenty. But it's the same thing. How is my child supposed to learn how to eat at a restaurant unless we practice eating at a restaurant? And it doesn't count if it's Chuck E. Cheese.
No.
Where it's chaos.
Yeah.
They're gonna, if you want a child to be quiet in a quiet environment, they're gonna need to practice in a quiet environment, which means they're not going to be quiet while they practice that skill. And again, it's that equal measure of the adults adjusting their expectations and the child learning and building a skill. The two have to happen.
And it's hard for everyone involved.
Oh, for sure.
Absolutely. I remember when my 8-year-old was younger, even just going to a park, I would intentionally wear a t-shirt or something that had some frame of ASD acceptance or ASD advocating
the kind of
some sort of my
signal.
shirt right now says stimming is self-care.
Right.
I would not that people are going to read my shirts, but I would have daydreams picturing like, okay, is there like a little flag I can put on my backpack, or is there something I could attach to my child to just be like, just be mindful. Like, and no one should ever have to wear what they're going through on the outside of their body more than they are already exhibiting that. But that was my parental response, was like, we're just trying our best. And when my anxiety would get bad about it, I'd just be like, I wish it was just on display. Not that it would shut down the looks, not that it would shut down the comments, not that it would, like, I had people that would straight up come up to me and be like, oh, are you his nanny? And I'm like, why? Weird. Like, why is that even a question? Do I not look like I have, like, he's not going to listen to me no matter who I am, because he's going to run amok and he's going to do his own thing.
Weird.
It was really weird.
No, I think that uncovers something that is in general problematic with, and maybe this is like something that we just experience within the state of Minnesota or within the United States, but like it's this negativity first, judgment first, lead with bad first, versus like, you know, the things that you see online that are like, don't judge a book by its cover, or, you know, you don't know the struggles someone's going through, give them some grace, be compassionate, right? Like those things are not difficult to do.
No.
And when you're looking at a child, and when you're looking at the caretaker of said child, and you're seeing, you know, behaviors that are more challenging or maybe socially unacceptable, you know, like, why can't we lead with good?
Right.
Why can't we lead with like, oh, like that child is screaming and throwing things and whatnot. And this kind of bleeds into this other story I have, and I won't go through in the same detail as yesterday, but we had gone to a violin concert. It was my oldest's violin concert. It was at a church setting, a Christian church setting, and so there's pews that we're sitting in. And then in the back space are kind of more child-friendly activities like blocks and whatnot.
Sure.
And so the kids that can't sit still are kind of doing that. And that, hello, is my kids, along with a number of other kids.
Right.
And this is a family-friendly event. This is just like playing songs from the Suzuki book that they're learning, holiday songs and whatnot. And my 4-year-old did a chase me moment where he's running, suddenly something made him dysregulated, and so he starts running up and down the aisle and like on the pews where we are, and my his dad at the time had left the area with our middle child to give him a break from the space, and I hadn't realized that, and so I turn and I look and I realize, oh, that's my child running amok. Because I was trying to video record my 10-year-old, and so I stop and I'm like, ooh, look what I have in my hand. Didn't work.
No.
And I was like, you know, like, hey, you should come over here. Didn't work. And then I tried the like, you gotta stop this now, and that didn't work.
Right.
And then I tried to take a step towards him, which just incites more running and jumping and climbing. And again, we're in a room full of other people and no one's stopping my child. No one's helping except for one parent. All of a sudden makes eye contact with me and was like, shakes her head yes, and like opens her arm like, can I try to contain him? And I just was like shaking my head yes and smiling like, yes, please. So we get him wrangled and redirected, refocused.
Right.
I gave him his vibrating chewy. He's good.
Yeah.
So he's doing that. His dad comes back into the space and everything's settled, and the not the woman, but the woman's mother that was there with a child who was also having a difficult time sitting still and being quiet and all this stuff, she just reaches over and touches my hand and just goes, you're doing a great job. And I just was like, thank you.
Yeah. Yep.
That's what it looks like to lead with good.
Yeah.
That's like, this is a child. It does not matter whether he's grappling with a invisible disability, a visible disability, no disability at all, just like having a hard time. It's a Monday and it's 7:30 and I'm being asked to be in this really loud space with these like, I mean, the violins sound beautiful, so it's not like we're enduring torture. But like, it's a lot going on, and this woman just like, none of the reason why didn't matter. She just wanted to help, and then she wanted to like, because I'm sure I looked like I was next to imploding or exploding or crying, or just the two. Like, tired. I probably looked very tired, and she just and what's funny is that younger me with just my first child would have been like, yeah, I know I'm doing a good job.
Right.
Whatever.
Right.
Don't be condescending, you know. But that would be me leading with negativity. That would be me leading with bad, right?
Because there is, I mean, no matter what, there's going to be that fraction of until you've lived it or experienced it.
Yes. Or it's happening to someone you know.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm so tired of that. Like, you can't have an ounce of sympathy. Just to like, again, lead with good.
Yeah.
Like, even someone who's having the most terrible day is grouchy and grumpy and shoves into you and is like in the crowd. You can't just like have a moment and be like, you know what's funny is my 10-year-old does that beautifully. I'll be driving the car and I am a road rager. So like, I'll be in a car, and I've gotten a lot better because of my 10-year-old.
Yeah.
So I'll be like, what is your problem? Why can't you just drive the speed limit? Right? And then from the back, my 10-year-old will be like, maybe they're not feeling well. Maybe they're sick. And I'm like, fuck, maybe you're right.
You know what's funny is there are times where if something's happening in front of me or next to me, I get road ragey. If someone's doing something to me behind me, there are times where I'll be like, you don't even know what's going on in my life today. You don't even know.
So when someone's mad at you or impatient with you, you're like,
I'm very
chill out, my man.
Stop.
We all just trying to survive today. But if you're trying to get somewhere and you're just like, what are you?
Right.
Honk, honk, honk.
Why'd you cut me off? Like, it's the icing on the cake. It's that like you drop your keys in the snow. You're just like, I just need today to just...
But that's really funny. Like, I feel like that could easily be applied to parenting. Like, you're seeing a child, like, act a fool or watching a screen. That was a big one. Prior to today, Jessica, younger Jessica, especially pre-kid Jessica, with all of her parenting knowledge, while not being a parent, would see kids, like, on a screen or whatever at a restaurant, and I'd be like, right? And, like, developmentally, I get it. Now, I understand now, in a different way. And, like, if that's a tool you gotta use, I'm sympathetic and I approve. But, like, also, like, if you're at a restaurant, like, try first, and then I get it, because I've definitely, like, did my 4-year-old squish some bugs on my phone at that violin concert?
That's a great game.
Sure did.
Yeah, my 1-year-old loves
right?
That.
And so, like, when I needed a break to regulate my body, he squished some bugs on my phone. Did it last long? No. He's got ADHD without being diagnosed ADHD. We're just going through the motions right now.
And not like what society thinks ADHD is. Like what ADHD truly, and it wasn't honestly until, because with our 20-some-year-old, he had, I don't want to say stereotypical, but he had, like, the type that you would think of the most, where, like, a hard time concentrating in school, easily distracted, can't complete assignments, stuff like that. Whereas being introduced to the realm of once ADHD becomes so impactful in someone's life to the point where it can be dangerous.
Well, there's two types,
yes,
right? There's a type 1 and a type 2.
Yeah.
One is primarily inattentiveness or easily distracted. The other one is that hyperactive impulsive, and it's the hyperactive impulsive one that I don't think we fully understand. And it presents itself at different ages, and it presents itself differently between biologically female children and biologically male children.
Yeah.
And I think some of that has to do with the fact that we didn't even start studying it until the 70s or something like that. And it was primarily male subjects that were studied.
Always.
No surprise there. No surprise there.
Always.
So then there's that, and then I remember being raised in the big Ritalin boom, right? ADHD was being diagnosed everywhere, and teachers were diagnosing it, and there was all this negative rhetoric and this misunderstanding going on.
Right.
And again, it was that I can't focus and concentrate in school, so thus I must have ADHD. Or I'm having a challenge with this child in my classroom, it must be, they're not listening to me, so it must be ADHD.
Right.
And I think that those of us that lived through that time as children, I think still carry some of those assumptions with us, or that misunderstanding with us. And then those of us had children who have ADHD, and we're
like full force.
I didn't understand because there's a lot of sensory things involved with ADHD, and then there's a lot of parallel between autism and ADHD.
Absolutely.
Because if you're not able to sit and attend to social cues and body cues, because you're so all over the place, you're not learning social emotional skills either.
Right.
And so there's a lot of parallels between the two because of that.
Yeah.
But yes, so leading with the assumption of good, man, we all benefit from that.
Well, and it goes to it plays hand in hand with what we were saying last week of if we're taking the time to help educate and guide our children to be mindful of others, to learn how to interact in social spaces, stuff like that, why can't the same be applied to neurotypical people or adults for that matter?
Right. Well, and that's what we had talked about, was it's the adults' work to do that, and children will learn by example. And so if we're all, in a common space and your child's what's wrong with that kid? Your response shouldn't be, I don't know. Yeah, what they're doing is weird.
And it also shouldn't be, just don't look.
Oh my God.
Oh, don't just don't pay attention
Please
to
don't
it.
Ignore.
We had a beautiful moment in our Florida trip where one of the families that we met at the pool, their daughter had one of her arms amputated.
Sure.
And in that moment, you got to see kids approach it tactfully. Mm-hmm. And you also saw kids who were younger and maybe not taught or fully understand what you could say to someone in that situation.
Because younger kids are learning how to do it, and they're categorizing things.
So they're also looking to the adult to help guide that conversation.
Sure are.
And there was one grandparent, and I'm highlighting this because I think from my experience, it felt good to see someone of an older generation be this person.
Right.
But she was like, well, instead of being dismissive about what this girl is going through, she was like, how about you ask her? Mm-hmm. And just because she was like, why doesn't she have a hand? And she just was like, how about you ask her? And she helped engage a very appropriate, comfortable, and approachable conversation for them to have. And this younger girl's sister was also there to be a part of the conversation to help her, because she was younger. But I'm sure she's heard and she's had to be taught, and she has had to be talked to probably more times than she wanted to about her situation. So there's so many pieces, and it was just so amazing to finally see it play out in such a accessible and inclusive way that it made you go, okay, there are people still out there that genuine. There are, but
and I would argue there's probably more of us than we realize.
Yes, but it's like reviewing a business, right? The people that you hear the loudest,
yes, are the negative ones.
Are the
For
negative
sure.
ones.
So that's a call. That's a call to action, everyone. That's being
Jesus
loud.
Christ.
Your tea is so hot.
My tea is so hot.
You're like,
I want it so bad. I want to drink it so bad, and I love this mug. but it works. And that's the problem with
Keeps
this
your
mug.
water so hot.
Because it keeps it hot. Oh.
No, so I think that it's a lovely call to action to everyone to be like, let's be loud and positive. Let's be loud and compassionate. Let's be loud and inclusive. And that's not to say that we're not, but just like those of us who may choose the don't do anything, don't say anything, is that's the same as doing it wrong.
Right.
In many ways.
Right.
Like the inaction does the same amount of damage as, you know, that negativity first or that hatred first. And, you know.
Well, and then you sprinkle a little ableism in there. And...
Oh my God, ableism is everywhere, man. Like, it's so funny when it happens. And you almost have this moment where you're like, I know that didn't just come out your mouth. Because... like, it's not always, and this isn't new in the realm of, like, you know, bigotry in general or discrimination in general.
Right.
But, like, it's not, the most hurtful things aren't the things that are always obvious, right? Or, like, what I like to call, like, movie situation or like what stories are written about. Those are the really big and loud examples. The everyday examples are small and they almost pass by you without you realizing it until you get home and you think about it again and you go, that bitch actually said.
That's when you instantly click, I'm calling my sister.
Oh my God. Well, sometimes, yeah, you say, you like process it and you say it out loud to someone else and that someone else goes, whoa, 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 back up. And that's what it was for me. Like, I was processing a situation recently with my occupational therapist. And her response was, yeah, it's a common ableist point of view. And I was like, oh, I didn't even see it like that, but you're absolutely right. That's with the assumption.
Well, it's a hard thing to process as a Caucasian female.
Yes.
When you're raising neurodivergent children who are being discriminated against.
Right. Well, our intersectionality is balanced between privilege and what word do I want to use?
I don't know.
Minority doesn't feel right because white, like being female has its own thing, but we're white females, which is like not.
No, it don't count.
To
a degree.
It counts to a degree, it does, but not in the same way.
No.
Not nearly in the same way. And intersectionality highlights that. But anyway, when you're comfortable and used to being in a privileged situation, when suddenly you're not as numb to it, or you don't see it as accurately because you're like, well, of course you wouldn't discriminate against my children, right? You know what I mean? You're almost like, that can't be real, and then it is real, and it's happening right in front of you with the people that you care about. Not your children, like from the people you care about, that you consider colleagues, that you consider friends, that you consider
family.
And then suddenly you're like, oh, whoa. So we hope that it's not a new way of handling the podcast.
We're bringing it back to
I think we're recentering.
Yeah.
We're having a moment to recenter ourselves and our goal with this, and kind of grounding the conversation back towards the point of view of the parent and raising neurodivergent children.
Yeah. And just sprinkle in some fun getting to know us, getting to know our families, and interact with us and see that you're not alone.
Yeah.
You're not the only one that holes up with whatever your comfort items are to decompress from your day, because all day long you're catering to everyone else's needs, not your own.
After this movie situation yesterday, there's definitely at least 2 to 3 days of like, I can't, I can't go out in public for a little bit.
Sure. Well, tomorrow. Good luck.
But that's just my oldest. Like, I'm not bringing my other kids to that.
Sure. There's a couple things this week where I then ended up with 3 pints of Ben and Jerry's in my freezer.
Ooh, girl.
And I just went, don't touch it, don't ask about it. It's off limits, it's mine. It's hidden behind the vegetables.
I got the Christmas tree Reese's peanut butter cups. That's what I got.
Oh, fair.
In my freezer.
Ice cream in the winter, for some reason, it's my go-to.
Absolutely not. It's cold outside. I don't want to be cold inside. Anyway,
we're bringing it back to...
We're recentering it. We're regrounding it. And if you have a story you would like to share about going and bringing your child out to a social situation that just, like, seemed like it was chaos, or something happened, something good happened with the general public, or maybe something not so good happened with the general, share your story. I think that you'll find that so many people have experienced something similar, or maybe have like some anecdotal, like, hey, this is what helps me in those situations, this is what, or maybe we just all collectively go, it sucks, which is also okay, because that's the point.
Right, we'll just meet up for a glass of wine and go, okay.
So you can find us on Facebook and Instagram. You can email us at thebehavioralplan@gmail.com. Share your story with us, and and we hope you have a wonderful holiday break, because this is it. We're gonna take a little 2-week or so break. And we'll see you in the new year.
But keep an eye on our stuff, because I fully intend to be like...
Oh yeah, we'll still be pumping out stuff, just not episodes.
Yeah, there could be a few posts like, my 8-year-old said this today.
Oh, yeah,
I might share some. It's gonna be a dysregulation of...
Oh my God, cookies.
Chaos.
Yeah, like my kids are gonna get their bellies full of cookies, and then it's gonna be... I know. I know. I just don't want to be the parent that's like, hey, because these things exacerbate your behavior, I don't want to have you indulge in these things that make childhood fun.
Right.
You know what I mean?
It's...
Like, I want them to have fun childhoods. Yeah. I want them to be able to enjoy the holiday, to enjoy cookies and, the processed foods that other kids are eating. Like, I want them to be able to feel like they can live their life just like any other child at the same time as being like, okay, well, I'm about to feed you this shit that sets you off. Right. So I gotta just like make sure we're in the basement, ride this out until it exits your system.
Like, come on, snow, so we can go sledding. Come on, snow, so we can go sledding.
If you're listening to this and you have proprioception kids and you don't get snow, you might want to consider moving.
Or buying a snowmaker.
It might be... Well,
no,
it might be cheaper to buy a snowmaker.
If you got a big enough yard.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, we wish everyone well.
Yes, a happy holiday and a happy new year. And we'll see you when you return.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'll be good.
Yeah. So this was Jessica.
And this is Jennifer.
And this was the Behavioral Plan Podcast.